Ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to the world of battling scientific misinformation, there are two channels out there that I put head and shoulders above all others. One of them being the Back to the Science YouTube channel that we've got here, run by Dr. Susan Oliver. I had the absolute honor and privilege a couple of weeks ago of speaking to Dr. Susan Oliver and interviewing her about her channel and just generally what she's up to. And you're going to see that interview now. But first of all, I just want to give those who might not be familiar with Dr. Susan Oliver a little bit of an introduction to what she's all about. She is a PhD scientist. We get into that in the interview. And if you were to look at Dr. Susan Oliver's channel, any of her videos, you'll walk away being amazed and impressed at how easily she's able to dissect various scientific articles and papers used by anti-vaxxers and conspiracy theorists alike, and how she's able to simplify what's being said in those papers and to communicate it to the likes of me, who certainly don't have the knowledge that she has. The way that she's able to simplify and debunk these crazy conspiracy arguments is absolutely fantastic. I'm a massive fan. I have, of course, linked her channel in the description, but if anybody is into, real thorough debunking style content, I just can't recommend any further than the Back to the Science YouTube channel. So it's not just me, by the way, who is a fan of Dr. Susan Oliver. There is also another familiar face. Let's introduce him.
So welcome to this talk. We're talking to Dr. Susan Oliver, who you'll probably recognize from various previous videos.
Yeah, Dr. John Campbell, it would appear, was a massive Dr. Susan Oliver fan. And in his own words, she is a proper scientist and the real McCoy.
And Susan is a proper scientist. She is the real McCoy.
So it might seem a little bit odd. Me and Dr. John Campbell both wanting to interview the same person. We'll get into that in the video. What I will say is, if you see any little cuts in the video, my internet does every now and then like to take a massive shit, and that is that's the reason for that. So let's just dive into question number one. Now, you have a background, I believe, in science communication, which I think is going to be really important in this topic. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Okay, so I started off just doing a degree in chemistry, and then I did for a little while work in a lab. But yes, after that, I did work in pretty much medical communication. So communicating information on medical topics to both doctors and also to the general public. So that's what I did for most of my career before I decided to have my third midlife crisis and go back to uni and get a PhD.
And with the communication bit, how much of that would have been involved? How much of that would have involved sort of looking at scientific papers and getting an idea of what people were and weren't saying?
Look, pretty much most of it. So in Australia, if you're doing, and I was mainly doing communications about pharmaceuticals, but we did also do work for government health departments and also for medical charities. In Australia, and I assume it's exactly the same in the UK, you cannot say anything in a medical communication which isn't 100% correct. So it was important to look at what the scientific literature said and make sure you described exactly what that literature was saying, including anything that made something less robust, I guess. So you had to look at the limitations because it was really critical that you didn't sort of provide misinformation, because if you did, the company who you were doing the work for would be fined.
So it's pretty important you got it spot on, which I think is a useful skill, as we might get into later on, that it's easy for you then to spot when somebody perhaps isn't interpreting a scientific paper correctly.
Yes, that would be correct, yes.
Which I think, yeah, we'll definitely be getting into that, as people might expect. And then you said, obviously, then you went back and you did your PhD, and I believe it was to do with polymers, or do you want to tell us a little bit about what that was about?
Yeah, so it was... not polymers as most people think of polymers. So most people think of polymers as plastics. This was what we call macromolecules, which are molecules that are basically designed to do specific things. And I was looking at their applications in nanomedicine. So the areas I was looking at was a potential cure for childhood cancer, and also looking at ways to kill antimicrobial resistant bacteria. So they were the two areas that I was looking at. So we had to design molecules that could kill cancer cells but not kill normal cells. And likewise with the bacteria, we wanted molecules that could kill the bacteria but didn't kill human cells, because not a particularly effective treatment in either case if it does that. But I was going to say one thing that I should make clear is that all the research I was doing was in vitro, so in a lab. So although I did have like success in killing cancer cells, not killing human cells, and killing bacteria, not killing human cells again, that doesn't actually mean it will definitely work once it gets into a person. So I'm doing very much the first step of the research, and then other people are going to hopefully take it further.
So do you think it is something that potentially could be like a groundbreaking, or is it just at this stage we don't know?
Yeah, look, I'd love to think it would be groundbreaking, but probably not. I remember, in fact, when I first met with my supervisor before I started my PhD, one of the things he wanted to warn me about was, he said, if a lot of people sort of start their PhD and think they're going to change the world, you're not. You're going to be a tiny little cog. You're going to do a little thing, and then someone else is going to build on that, and someone else is going to build on that. And I think that is the case. Look, one of the molecules that I did develop, it has been used by another research group, and they've taken it further. They've actually mixed it up with something else, and then they've used it to treat, I think it was breast cancer, but in mice. So they've gone the next stage after me. So I've just killed the cells in, as they say, in a petri dish. They're not really petri dishes, but that's the type of thing. Whereas they've taken it one step further, and they've now actually managed to shrink tumours in mice. So that's positive. Whether someone will take it further or not, very hard to say. You really need a huge amount of money to develop anything, and there's just not enough money to look at everything. So possibly what the work I've done will never get anywhere, but I hope that one day it does. We'll see.
Well, it sounds something really worthwhile to have been involved in that. So I'm very impressed. You did basically almost a full career in medical communication. You've done your PhD, so obviously you've got a really, really solid background in science. And then the pandemic kind of comes along, and then somehow you end up getting involved in this corner of YouTube, and making video shorts for John Campbell, or video reports, if you like. How did all that come about?
Okay, so as with a lot of people, when the pandemic started, I was quite interested in what was going on. And at this stage, I had finished my PhD, but I was just working at the university. And I just, John Campbell's video was served to me on YouTube. I started watching them, and, he seemed like a reasonable guy, and he sort of provided daily updates. And they sort of came up about the time I was about to go to bed. So I used to watch his video and then go to sleep, basically. And look, I did used to sometimes pick up that he had got a few things wrong, but it seemed like he was just, generally wrong. He wasn't being deliberately wrong. But there was one time, and he was actually reporting on something in Australia, and we were just sort of starting our vaccine rollout, and I think it was the chief medical officer. He sort of had said in a presentation to the general public that there will be some people that you wouldn't give the vaccine to. And he sort of said, look, if an elderly person is about to die, it'd be pointless giving them the vaccine, because why let them even have an immune response if they've only got a few days left? And that was what he said. And John Campbell had misunderstood that and thought he was saying, oh, we're not going to vaccinate the elderly. And he was sort of doing his usual, fancy saying that, you know how he carries on. Anyway, I sent him a nice little email saying, look, John, you've actually misunderstood what they were saying, and just explaining to him what was going on. And at the same time, he had been showing pictures of people wearing their face masks in various places. And I happened to have a cool one of me wearing my pink lab coat and wearing a pink face mask. This was before you could actually get proper face masks, and the only ones that were available were like the cotton ones. Although the one I had, everyone, just so you know, it actually had a polypropylene layer, so it wasn't just cotton. Anyway, but I was wearing it in the lab, and I got a photo taken and I sent it to him. Said, look, I don't know whether you're still showing photos of people, but if you are, here's one of me. Anyway, he replied back and said, look, thank you so much for letting me know about the mistake. And yes, I definitely still want pictures of people. And he said, oh, and he just said in his, and I also quite like video reports. So I thought, no worries. Anyway, he corrected himself the next day, showed the picture of me in my face mask. And for a little while, I just kept watching. And then, things started happening in Australia with the vaccine rollout and stuff. So I thought, oh, look, I'll just give him a few updates. And so I sort of sent him one and he played it. I sent him another one and he played it. And this went on for quite a while. And they weren't particularly serious. I was sort of keeping it to I think he'd said at one stage they should all be under 5 minutes. And then a few times I'd sort of say, oh, anyway, I've got to finish this 5 minutes. And so then he'd sort of said, oh, you can make it 7 minutes. So anyway, I was doing all these things. And then I think I mentioned in one of the videos, and I can't remember why, but I mentioned the fact that I, that I'd worked in nanomedicine. And he'd actually then sort of sent me an email, said, oh, look, would you like to do an interview about nanomedicine and tell everyone all about it? And I said, yeah, sure, John, no worries. And so we were all set up to go. And then Sydney, where I live, went into lockdown. We had suddenly, it was a limo driver for people at the airport. Now, there weren't many people coming into Australia because we had our borders closed, but obviously you still have to have cargo coming in. And this was a person, I think it was a flight crew. So he was basically picking up the flight crew from the airport, taking them to a hotel. He got infected with COVID. He hadn't been wearing a mask, even though he was apparently supposed to be. And by the time they found out, he'd sort of spread it a fair bit around his local area, which just happened to be the area that near where I worked. And it spread, and basically where I lived went into lockdown, and then the next day the whole of Sydney went into lockdown. So we were going to be talking about the nanomedicine. I said, look, John, we've gone into lockdown. I haven't really been thinking about what I'm going to say because I've just been keeping up to date with what's happening. So we ended up doing a talk instead about the lockdown, and it was as terrible as this one's probably going to be because, I keep repeating myself and stumbling over words. It was a pretty and inappropriate giggling and all sorts of stuff. It was a pretty terrible interview, to be honest. But anyway, he put it up, and then at the end of the interview he said to everyone, and we've got another one coming up, and we are going to be talking about the nanotechnology. And he then said to me at the end of that interview, after we were off camera, asked me if I could actually buy myself a proper microphone, because I was just using the microphone on my laptop, and he wanted me to he said, if we're talking about something serious, you should really get a good microphone so that we can have a proper talk. So I said, yeah, no worries, John. So I sent off to, because we weren't allowed to go shopping anywhere, so I'd ordered a microphone online. And in the meantime, there'd been a new meta-analysis studied a new meta-analysis published about ivermectin, which basically showed that it had no effect. And he had just done a presentation on one by Tess Laurie that said the opposite. So I just sent him a quick email saying, hey, John, just letting you know there's a new meta-analysis out, and explain to him why it was actually a better meta-analysis. And I think at that stage I also had the new microphone. And by the way, I've now got my new microphone, so let me know when you're ready to do the interview. No reply. So I waited a few days, sent him a WhatsApp message because I do have his WhatsApp number. Same thing. Just letting you know, John. I didn't mention the ivermectin this time. Just letting you know, John, I've got the new microphone. Just let me know when you want to talk. Nothing. And he just ghosted. Yeah. It was really quite bizarre. And I had spoken to him about, this is a really weird thing, is we had a conversation about ivermectin, and I had sort of said to him, pointed out a few things to him, and he kind of agreed, and he seemed to be fine to talk about it then. But then I think when I guess maybe I just pushed a bit too much for him. But I honestly thought that once he saw the information, he would realize that, yes, there isn't really any evidence, because at that stage I still kind of thought he was a genuine guy who was going to follow the evidence like he says he does. So I really was quite shocked. But I must admit that for a while I still was expecting that as more evidence came out, he would realize he was wrong and correct himself. And obviously that never happened, and he continued to go further and further down the rabbit hole. And obviously now he's just saying what he needs to say to get the views.
He's certainly getting a lot of views. And you sent him the email to correct him on the ivermectin. That didn't work. But then you did make use of your microphone to make a video about ivermectin that YouTube then took. I believe it's reinstated now, but YouTube took it down. What did you say in that video to have it taken down?
To this day, I do not know. I think I might have been a little bit cheeky with the title, because I said something like ivermectin effective in monkey kidney cells. So some moron there may have seen the word effective and not realized what it was about. But I honestly don't think anyone really watched it. I think it was just picked up a few keywords and was taken down. And because I was a new channel, they just sort of didn't bother to look. And I had no way of communicating with them to actually talk to them about it. And I waited and waited until I finally became a YouTube partner, and then you supposedly then have access to someone to ask questions. And I finally got there. I'd sort of said this person a really nice thing. I said, look, can you just clarify what was actually wrong with the video? Because I just want to know, because I really don't want to make another video that you think is misinformation. And I knew that there was nothing wrong with it, but I just thought I'd be nice and polite. Just let me know what it was, because I really just want to make sure I don't make the same mistake again. And I could not get an answer out of them. They just sort of kept sending me links to, oh, well, these are the guidelines about medical misinformation. Send me a link. It's like, yes, I've read those guidelines, but I really can't understand what I possibly said. What it is? Can you please let me know? And they just would not answer. I mean, obviously the people that they've got working there are just total morons. So then I don't know why they have them, because at the end of it, I was just more frustrated. And I think they'd be better off not having it as a service if they can't help you. That being said, I've now had more experience with the Twitter team, and they are quite helpful. So far since I've sort of go to them after YouTube takes things down and rejects my appeals, once I go to them, so far at least, everything's always been reinstated. So
well, that's good to know. Because speaking to the YouTube, the chat support on YouTube is like you say, it's like talking to a bot. And it's because I've had a video that was up on Andrew Bridger not so long ago get taken down. And when I spoke to them, they said, well, it's been reviewed and we will review it again. And I said, okay, well, can it be reviewed by a human next time, not a bot? And they said, well, it was reviewed by a human first time. I thought it can't be. Anyway, it was reviewed and it was reinstated. But I just felt like I was banging my head against a brick wall. It was they are so frustrating. Right. So, yes. So that does bring me on to my next question. Now, you started addressing John Campbell's videos, and he's made an awful lot of mistakes, which, a mind-blowing number of mistakes. And I'll ask you what you think some of the worst ones are in a couple of minutes. But I did get this question on Twitter for you. And this made me think, because John Campbell puts out videos on almost a daily basis. And for him to get a study, to look at the study, to properly understand the study and to research the references and to research the source of the study, how can I put it? I'm amazed that he can do such a thorough job if he's doing it so regularly. So how long does it take you to actually research and to find fault in what he's saying?
Look, it typically sort of, including everything, it probably takes 3 to 4 days. That being said, obviously I'm not working continuously all day. You know, I'll take Cindy out for a walk. I'll go down rabbit holes looking at stuff that has no relevance. But generally, it is about three to four days to do it. Yeah.
So,
but like I said, I'm not being employed, so I'm not being as efficient as if I was when I was actually getting paid by someone. When, you know, you're very focused and making sure you work. So, you know, I'm like, they're probably not. Like, I think when I worked, I probably worked about 10 to 11 hours a day. Now I'm probably spending maybe 4 to 6 hours a day actually working on it. So it's obviously less time. But one day I should really sort of actually check exactly how long I'm doing it. And I keep trying to make myself more efficient, but I'm not. I think I probably don't do things the best way, but it's fine. So, but that's how long. I mean, I don't think it takes John very long at all, because if you're not making sure you get everything right, it doesn't take very long. He literally just, I mean, he does decide which of the quotes from the paper he's going to talk about and underline with the green pen and print them out on the piece of paper. But I don't think he does much beyond that. And I think a lot of the stuff he's now presenting, it's just stuff that someone's emailed to him. So he's not even really looking for anything himself. It's just things that other anti-vaxxers have brought to him. That's an assumption of mine. I could be wrong about that. But the fact that he quite often says things like, why hasn't anyone else looked at this? And it's like, well, there's about 50,000 papers looking at it, John, or that's an exaggeration. But that sort of thing. It's clear that he doesn't really do any research whatsoever. It appears that he's being spoon-fed by various people, and sometimes that's really obvious, like that time when he sort of thought he had a new analysis looking at the statistics that was just so ridiculously wrong that any idiot could have told him that it wasn't right, and it was a Substack. So sometimes he just doesn't even have the basics.
I will agree. He has got very, very good at underlining stuff. I do, he's got the skills when it comes to underlining.
Yeah.
But I think you're also right that a lot of the stuff that I see him putting out now and I don't really watch him an awful lot these days, but when for some reason I think, I'm going to check that out, it is stuff that I've seen previously appear on Twitter, from other people. It seems to be he's kind of like not leading the way. He's saying, "Oh, I've seen that on Twitter. I've been sent this, and I'm gonna put my own spin on it."
And to be honest, and to be honest, he always did that. Like, he pretty much, each of his videos, he was just repeating something that someone else had said. It's just that when he started, he was repeating good things that other people said, whereas now he's just repeating anti-vax nonsense. So he hasn't particularly changed. It's just that now what he's choosing to repeat is not the type of stuff that any credible person would repeat.
Do you sometimes feel like a salmon swimming up him in the sense that he can put out so much content on such a regular basis, because obviously he's not researching it as thoroughly as perhaps he should, and he's just drowning the internet, that it's impossible to keep up with, because obviously the amount of work you've got to put in to actually properly understand the stuff is far more than the work he needs to put in to misunderstand it. How can do you sometimes just feel overwhelmed, or?
Oh, look, I don't, because I think I just accept that I can't debunk everything he says, and not just him. I mean, he's not the only one. I probably do more videos about him than other people, because I think he's particularly dangerous because he did start out reasonable. And so a lot of people who listen to him from the start are still actually listening to him and thinking that, he's still telling them the truth. So I think that makes him a lot more dangerous than people who were nutcases the whole time. But yeah, I just have to accept that I can't possibly address everything he says. And also, in a way, often he does repeat the same thing again and again and again. So often I'll look and I'll say, well, there's not even anything new here to debunk because I debunked it in the last video. I mean, the
Mm.
bigger problem is that virtually no one watches my videos, whereas quite a large number of people watch his videos, although his views are actually going down as well. I think people are just getting bored with information about COVID. That being said, if I do videos on things that aren't about COVID, I get even less views. So who knows? I think people just maybe think, okay, Susan, she's the one who's supposed to do this, so we don't want to watch her doing other stuff. But I'm just going to do what I want to do. So,
But you're right about the fact that he's dangerous because he does have a degree of legitimacy about him. So I was a classroom science teacher for 20 years. And when I was teaching science, at the end of a lot of lessons, I'd like to find like a 5-minute little video clip for the kids to watch that related to what we'd learned that lesson. And quite often John Campbell's early videos came up, especially if I was doing obviously something to do with biology. And, you know, he became just like a known figure in the classroom. So when I kind of, you know, I kind of stopped watching him for a while. I started showing other people's videos and stuff. But then when he started popping up in my feed, I was like, oh, it's this guy. He'll be worth listening to. And I went into watching his videos with that mindset. He's a trustworthy guy. And that, you know, yeah, it took me a while to realize. Okay, so offline, how where you are, how many people do you encounter that share this kind of mistrusting mRNA vaccines or this kind of conspiratorial mindset? How many people do you encounter in the real world?
One person.
Yeah. And did they know you? Did they recognize you?
Oh yeah. So this is someone I know. She's a fellow dog owner. In addition to, she did get the vaccine, and she's now convinced that everything that's happened to her since then was caused by the vaccine. She also thinks the moon landing was faked.
It's never just the one conspiracy, is it? It's never just the one.
It's never the one. So that, and actually there is one other person who's a bit sad, because this is someone who I've known since I was 5, and we went to school together. And she actually, it was before I'd started making any videos, as when I was still working, but she started posting a lot of anti-vax nonsense on Facebook. And I was just commenting, sort of just pointing out how she was wrong. And I was a little bit not making fun of her, but making fun of the people that she was, the videos, because they were just so stupid. And so I was slightly making fun of the videos, and she unfriended me. And not just me, but she's unfriended the majority of people that she went to school with, which I think is quite sad really. But yeah.
It is. I know I've got a friend, I'm not seen him for a long time, who's gone well and truly down that rabbit hole. And of my other friends that were still very close with him, he won't speak to them. He won't speak to his parents anymore, you know, because nobody's awake enough to be on his level.
Yeah.
Days, you know, and it is really sad. But I'm interested to you say, you know, you just kind of poking fun a little bit at the sources of information she that she was receiving, because that's what I quite like to do a lot. And I was going to ask you actually in the next question, that when it comes to the sources of information that John Campbell is getting, how much time do you think he does vetting his guests? Do you think?
I would say zero time. There's no reason to think that he vets anyone. I think they're just people who are suggested to him by other people, or people who even contact him. I mean, that being said, it's like he didn't even vet me, really. When I was on that, although I did actually email him from my university account. So I guess there probably was some credibility that I was, at least who I said I was. But, you know, I don't think he'll just believe anything people tell him about themselves. And I mean, most of the people he's talking to, he speaks to a lot of people who are retired, and that Looney, what's he called? Looney John? No, John. What?
John O'Looney. There we go.
Oh, you've got it ready.
That's where I was going. There was a reason I asked. Yeah. I mean, that blew my mind, because John O'Looney says some of the most, I mean, here we've got him saying that, okay, so I'm hearing that the vaxxed illuminate. So he's not saying they are, but then he goes on to say he's actually going to get himself a UV touch and try it, because it might be the mark of the beast. And John Campbell has got this man on his channel and is treating him almost like he's an expert on his channel. You know,
and he does that, like this, like another thing with the clots, like he interviewed someone who was, you know, and he was a major in the Air Force. And it's like, yeah, and why would he know anything about blood clots? You know, it's like he sort of brings up all these wonderful qualifications that are just not relevant. I mean, obviously, sometimes he does talk to people who do have relevant qualifications, but they're always outliers who, like, you know, 99 out of 100 other specialists in their field would say, no, they're wrong. But
well, that's it. When he was speaking to John O'Looney was talking about the supposed new, this new pathology of blood clots. And he said, John O'Looney specifically said, but when I show these to pathologists, they, you know, or he was talking about a particular pathologist, he said, they just told me that this is perfectly normal and it happens all the time. And then John Campbell's response wasn't, oh, well, that's what a pathologist has said, and you are a Milton Keynes undertaker. Maybe the pathologist is right. John Campbell's response was, well, you know that's not true, John. You know that isn't true. You know, as if John O'Looney, the man who thinks vaccinated people might illuminate, and the migrants coming over from France in a boat are trained UN soldiers to enforce the next lockdown, as if that man knows better than a pathologist. It just blew my mind, you know. It really, like, if John Campbell's credibility was low after that interview, it went through the floor for me. You know? Okay, you have put off an awful lot of content which has attracted supporters of John Campbell, and even in my comment section, I get people hate commenting you in my section. Like you might make a video and then someone will go into mine and they'll be like, oh, you're just like Susan Oliver. She's this, you know, or I bet you get along with Dr. Susan Oliver. And people are raking on you in my comment section. So how much hate do you get, and how much does it bother you? Like, do you just shake it off?
Well, in terms of how much, heaps and heaps and heaps. And some of it doesn't see the light of day because, as you know, the YouTube does have the held for review tab where a lot of the stuff actually ends up. I do occasionally just approve some of them anyway, just for a laugh, but a lot of the stuff I don't bother. And then, of course, YouTube does also just randomly deletes comments all the time anyway, which for the life of me, I don't get. They delete my comments, they delete people's completely innocuous comments supporting me. They're just the way the algorithm works is just a mystery. I was, sorry, I'm going off track again, but I was actually for a while talking to someone at YouTube about fixing that problem. And we did actually have some emails going backwards and forwards and they wanted some examples of the problem. And I had someone actually send me a bunch of comments that he'd made that was actually shadow banned. So I'd sort of sent all of them to YouTube, and they were obviously like, why on earth were these comments shadow banned? And for a few months, they kept sort of sending me updates or saying, yes, just letting you know, our team is still working on this. Well, I'll let you know when we've got some more information. And then finally, I just got one saying, it looks like this is going to take longer than what we thought. And so I'll let you know when we finally get it sorted. And that was well over a year ago. So it's obviously not going to happen. And it's a shame because this guy did actually put quite a lot of effort into sort of putting them all together for me so they could see what was being shadow banned. And anyway, the person will know who he is. So I still appreciate the work you did. But so that was the first part of the question. I got waylaid as I always do. As it affects me, not a lot. I think if it was going to affect me, I just wouldn't do it in the first place. You know, you sort of go into making these videos knowing that people are going to abuse you, and you just have to accept it. I can understand how some people it could be really difficult for them though. And I think it'd be particularly difficult for people like, okay, I'm making videos, I can stop whenever I like. I don't have to keep doing it. But there are people who have jobs that mean that they are in the public eye and they've got no choice. And these people also get abused. And so I don't know what they do. Like I just sort of laugh it off and think, wow, you'd have to be pretty stupid. Like I'm amazed at how stupid a lot of the comments are, and some of them are like really terribly insulting, and they, I get lots of insults about my appearance, which I'll probably get even more because I can just see on the screen because I normally record my videos during the day, but this is at nighttime and that's why you've got the shadow and everything, so I look even worse than normal. But the number of people who feel they need to comment on my appearance, and then I even get some weird people saying things like, oh, you're using Botox. I don't use Botox. I have wrinkles. You can't actually see them very well on the video, but I really do. And it's just sort of nuts. It really is. But in a way, it sort of means if they can't criticize what you're saying, they criticize you. And that's how people work.
I get it all the time. Bald, big nose, that's just off my wife, it's... It's even worse on YouTube. But no, I'm glad it doesn't affect you. I like to, certainly on my old channel at least, I like to stitch them together and make them into a little song, so I'd get a backing track, I'll play the guitar.
I did do a video once because I did have a series of videos looking at logical fallacies, which are some of my least popular videos I've ever made are my videos looking at logical fallacies. But I did do a video looking specifically at the ad hominem logical fallacy, and I did actually use quite a few of the comments for that, so that I did get some use out of them. I should actually make a few more videos with some of the really, really choice ones just for fun.
They always go down well, the mean comment videos. So one thing I want to ask, this slightly controversial question, this one, because what you find is that the kind of conspiracy kind of section of society, they will latch onto anything that is a minor truth, and then they'll stretch it into a million miles. Okay, so I would agree that during the pandemic, when certainly in this country, I don't know what it was like where you are, but certainly in this country, obviously everybody was being actively encouraged to take up the vaccine, and for obvious reasons. Okay, for obvious reasons. Yeah. And then some people, maybe politicians or TV presenters, would say something that perhaps wasn't 100% correct. I don't think being deliberately, maybe out of ignorance. So, for example, they may say, if you get the vaccine, then 100% you will never be infected with the COVID virus. You would say that, and they're not deliberately misleading. And actually, the vaccine is obviously really, really useful. But because that statement isn't 100% true, the conspiracy theorists are going to jump on that and look how we were lied. They blow it out of all proportion. How much do you think that has damaged kind of the trust in science?
That's a difficult one. In that particular example, that really was an example of a lot of people not understanding how vaccines work. Yeah. And that is because whether or not a vaccine is going to prevent you from, well, no vaccines prevent you from getting infected. That's actually impossible. You need to be infected for the vaccine to work. But what a lot of vaccines do prevent you from getting any sign of disease. And a perfect example is the measles vaccine. If you've had the measles vaccine, you'll pretty much never get measles. The reason for that is because the time from when you're infected to when you actually start showing typical symptoms of measles is quite a long time. And I can't remember now how long it is, but damn, maybe a week or 2 weeks. I don't know off the top of my head. But that means your body has long enough to make more antibodies when it first encounters the virus. And so before it can actually cause a disease, it's been taken care of. With something like COVID, you actually start showing symptoms not that long after you're infected. So once your antibodies have waned, and that's a perfectly natural process that happens with every single thing you're ever infected with, every single vaccine, your antibodies are going to contract. If they didn't, your blood would be like pea soup. That it has to happen. And so with something like COVID, where you've got a sort of short incubation period, you're always going to, at some stage, get the disease if you're exposed to it. Unless you're one of the people who actually has, I can't remember, there was some sort of gene that says some people actually tend not to actually get symptoms at all. But if you are someone who is going to get symptoms, it's going to happen. And that wasn't explained to people. And look, and the reason it wasn't explained to people is because most people aren't immunologists, and most people in good faith, they saw the results of the clinical trial. So I think, the case of Pfizer, for instance, it was about 90% effective against infection. The people didn't have the knowledge to realise that didn't mean it was going to last forever. And that includes, some doctors, most of the media, most government people. Immunologists, virologists, they would have known that that's not going to be the case. But a lot of other people didn't. That being said, if you actually go back to the official government communications at the time, they do actually say, we do not know how long this immunity is going to last. It is actually there, but that bit sort of obviously got cut off by the time it got to the media, so that wasn't communicated. So, yeah, so that I haven't really answered your question at all, have I? Which is, how much has this led to distrust? To the average person, it probably hasn't, because the average person has moved on and doesn't even care.
Yeah.
But to people who are into conspiracies and like to believe in that sort of thing, yes, it has helped heighten it. It's given them something to say. I mean, if I hear one more person say, we were told you're taking it to protect Granny and blah, 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 and it didn't happen, when in fact, early on it did happen. And even now, there are still a lot of studies that do show that you are less likely to transmit if you are vaccinated. It's not zero, but you are still less likely. And particularly if you do choose to keep getting booster shots, which is another ridiculously contentious issue. And my favorite insult, which just crushes me, people, is if you say to me, get your booster. I'm just so crushed. Even just thinking about it now, it's like, go
and get your It's a brilliant.
I'm sorry to get emotional, Cats, but yeah. But yeah, obviously, if you do keep getting boosters, you do have less chance of getting infected. When I was working, the company I worked for, and also the university as well, used to pay for us to have flu vaccines every year. They weren't doing that because they were trying to keep us out of hospital. They were doing that because they were trying to keep us at work. Because if you get the flu, you're going to you're going to be off for a while. So I think it depends on your circumstances, whether you want to get a booster or not. I mean, if you're elderly or you have comorbidities, you should definitely be continuing to get them, because you are at much higher risk of severe disease. But for other people, it's a personal decision. If you're going to be exposed, you think you're going to be exposed a lot and you really don't want to get sick. And, I think a lot of people, there is this thing now where some people are sort of saying, and these people who are pro-vaccine, they're saying, no, you shouldn't be getting vaccines because we know that extra ones aren't going to make any difference. You're already protected against hospitalization. But a lot of people saying that are people who have the type of job where if they do get sick, they still get paid. There are other people who, if they get sick, they don't get paid. And so I think people have to make a decision based on their own circumstances. And I think somewhere like the UK, I think you can now get them privately, can't you? I
think so, yeah.
Yeah. Whereas in Australia, if you're actually eligible they are still free. So if I want to get one and I haven't had it, I'm still tossing up whether to get a boost, whether to get a booster or not, because it is winter at the moment. And I did get my flu shot a month ago, which I did actually now have to pay for because I'm not working for anyone, but it was only like $30. So so not 30, 20 bucks. So it's not a lot of money, and the COVID shots are still free. As long as you're eligible, they're free. So
listen, I promise I won't keep you too long, and I've certainly kept you twice as long as I said I would, because
you just cannot be trusted.
I apologize. I am a misinformation agent. I will during this video. Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, and I am getting rather uncomfortable here on the floor.
Oh, is that what you said? Oh God,
I'm sitting on the floor because my lounge suite is getting recovered.
Oh, I thought that was last week. Take a bit of a detour and have maybe a 10-minute conversation about Dr. Susan Oliver's sofa, which I won't publish here, but it is a fascinating story, actually. Maybe she's revealed it on her own channel or will do in future. And then we just thanked each other and said goodbye. I just want to say, after speaking to Dr. Susan Oliver, I not only remain a big fan of hers, but if anything, I'm an even bigger fan. She was absolutely brilliant to chat to, exactly like you'd see on camera. Really enjoyed the time, and I really appreciate the time she gave to me. And again, I just cannot recommend enough that anybody that's into debunking scientific misinformation or just becoming more aware generally about the literature that surrounds the topic that we deal with in this corner of YouTube, go to the Back to the Science YouTube channel. You will find properly and thoroughly analyzed content. Really big fan. So I will be back soon with a more normal video. But again, thanks to Dr. Susan Oliver. Channel linked in the description. And I'll see you all soon.